Day 7. Hey, welcome to Digital Theologian. I'm Michael Hoff. This is day 7 of 40 Days with Jesus. Today we look at Jesus meeting the woman at the well in Samaria. All right, I'm just going to acknowledge it from the outset. There's no way I'm going to cover everything in today's passage. I'm sure many of you have heard at least one sermon on Jesus with the woman at the well in Samaria. You know the basics, right? Jesus is traveling into Samaria, a place where he normally wouldn't go. He meets with a woman that a rabbi normally wouldn't talk to. We have Jesus, who's Jewish, the Samaritan woman, who is a Samaritan. There's been a ton of tension between the Samaritans and the Jews over the years, especially since Zerubbabel and the attempts to rebuild the temple, when the Samaritans wanted to help and wanted to be a part of what was going on, and the Jews said, no thanks. And so there's all of this that's going back and forth, these layers of meaning that you've probably heard a sermon or two about. So I'm not going to cover all of that. There are just a couple of things that I do want to make you aware of. One, note the time of day when Jesus and the Samaritan woman meet at the well. This is something we've talked about with Nicodemus. He came in the middle of the night, and now we have the woman at the well here at noontime, the 6th hour, the middle of the day, a time when women wouldn't normally be at the well. Hey, let's go get our water in the morning or at night, because who wants to be out in the middle of the day in the desert gathering water? Nobody. That's not the time when you want to do that. You want to do that early in the morning or late at night. Here we have Jesus sitting at a well because he's tired, and he's there and he connects with a woman. And there's this interesting cycle that is going on here that plays on some stories that the Jewish audience, or those audiences that were familiar with the Old Testament, would maybe cue in on. Here is Jesus traveling to a foreign land, coming to a well, and then meeting a woman. This is the same story that's played out with Moses and his wife, and when the servant of Jacob goes to find a wife for Isaac. This is the kind of cycle that you would be expecting for Jesus to come away with a wife. With all of the tensions that are present, the woman doesn't even expect Jesus to talk to her, and yet here he is, and he introduces the question. And then we find out that after starting this dialogue with earthly things, he's really trying to shift her focus to spiritual things. And that happens a couple of times here in this chapter, that Jesus is introducing a natural topic, whether it's who's your husband or can I have a drink of water. Jesus is using these natural questions to dig into deeper realities of what's going on, to pull on the thread of what God is doing in this woman and in her life. The disciples, when they come back, they're astonished. They're like, what? Jesus is talking to a Samaritan woman here at the well when we're not around? Like, that doesn't happen. What's going on here? They're intrigued. They're puzzled by what's happening. As we read on, there are a handful of details that point to an Old Testament wedding cycle. It's this really interesting technique that the author of the gospel is using to remind his audience that there is more going on here than maybe what they're anticipating. We get these details of Jesus coming to a foreign land, Samaria, rather than Judea. He is there at a well. He meets a woman, right? There's a question of, can I have a drink of water? So the anticipation for readers might be that Jesus is going to find his wife. The question of who's your husband does come up. As you follow this cycle and you follow the pattern in the Old Testament narratives, the woman runs back to her family, to her group of people, and then introduces the man to that family, and he's received warmly. Well, here we see the exact same thing with the Samaritan woman. She goes back to her town, and she introduces them to Jesus. She says, come, you've got to meet the guy who knows everything about my life. This group of people comes to believe in Jesus based on the testimony of a Samaritan woman who's been married multiple times and is currently living with someone that is not her spouse. And she is almost the exact opposite of Nicodemus that we saw coming to talk to Jesus at night as a Jew, as an educated leader, as somebody from the higher class of society. He is male, he has power, he has influence, he has authority. And here is a woman that is in Samaria who is poor because all of her financial security is linked to these men who have cast her aside for someone else. in the past. Jesus' interaction with the woman at the well leads her to a place of faith. She tells the people in the city they come to know Jesus, and they believe him not only because of her testimony, but because of what they themselves see and experience. It is so important for us to recognize that we can lead people to Jesus, but ultimately it is when they have an encounter with the Lord themselves where the difference is made. I pray for you right now that today would be a day of encountering Jesus, that this would be a time where you understand the Lord more and that you feel a sense of his presence there with you right now. Holy Spirit, I ask that you would fill them with the rivers of living water that you provide, that the fresh drink of your Spirit would nourish them, would refresh them, and would renew them. God, I ask that you pour out your grace on everyone watching this video. May they know you and hear your voice more clearly. God, I ask that today be a day where they encounter the one who knows them completely. If you've been enjoying the videos, go ahead and hit the like button, subscribe, and if you really want to know what's going on, then click that little bell, because if you do, you'll get a notification every time I post a new video. I'll see you tomorrow.